Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Today we are back looking at an update 1.95 Devblog, and this time it's for another Japanese ship. Now, after what I would see as a disappointment in the Sendai yesterday, now we have quite an interesting machine. This is the Isuzu, and it is a smaller ship, it is a frigate, and pretty much it has, some cool guns on it. It also has some torpedoes, and overall, one of the problems when you look at stuff like rank 2 of the Japanese tech tree is that it is kind of bare right now. They had the Sayonin, which was added recently, but it's still not got, a ton of play to it. So with the bolstering of it with stuff like other frigates, that would be, really interesting. So the story behind this thing is during the late 50s, the Japanese Maritime Self-Defense Force, they were planning to expand their destroyer fleet with a number of new ships which were intended to complement the modernized destroyers which were leased from the US Navy. These plans were revised though because the JMSDF realized that their frigates had been serviced for a long time, and they actually were the ones which needed much more closer attention and were actually going to be retired, so therefore they needed a plan to try and replace them. So therefore, in the early 1960s, they decided to try and create something. So the development of a new frigate began in the 50s to hit this early 60s deadline, and eventually it resulted in the creation of the Isuzu class. The two ships of the class, the Isuzu and the Megami, these were laid down in April and August of 1960, and while the remaining two ships, the Kitakami and the Ai, were both laid down in June of 1962. So all four ships were completed, which is wonderful. The first batch of the ships entered service in 1961, and the other half were then commissioned in 1964. Ships of the Isuzu class served faithfully to the JMSDF and were eventually decommissioned in 1990, in the early 1990s, and they also served as a base for the development of the successor design, which we already have in game, the Chikugo class, which came shortly after their introduction. So if you want a general history, this is the predecessor to the Chikugo, which is the kind of, I suppose, the crowning gem of rank 2 for the Japanese right now. But there are some significant differences between it and this Isuzu class, and depending on how you see it, you can see it as kind of improvements on it when it comes to in-game, or you can see it as maybe not as good as the Chikugo. It's going to be really interesting to see what BR they decide to give this machine. So looking at some of its statistics, when we have a look, the first thing that has to be noted when we have a look over the devblog itself is the Isuzu will appear at rank 2. So this is going to be exactly the same as the Chikugo class, and also alongside some other ships which have been added. And since the Isuzu is an older design, people would think, well, maybe, this machine isn't as powerful. Maybe it does have some slightly less guns on it. What is the difference? And the main thing is it actually has more firepower technically than the Chikugo class. The firepower that is on board of this machine is 4 3-inch rapid-fire cannons, which is spread across 2 twin turrets. Now, the Chikugo in-game actually has one of these turrets. It actually has the front turret being a set of dual 76mm rapid-fire guns. So just take that and times it by 2, and that is the main firepower that you have on the Isuzu class. It also has access to a quad-barreled 324mm torpedo launcher. So for me personally, I think that is a really nice addition for this machine. I really like the use of torpedoes in War Thunder Naval. It definitely gives a different flavor to the game compared to other game modes. Now, the other problem, or one of the problems you could say about the Isuzu, though, is the fact that it doesn't have any secondary armament. So you just have that quad 76, you have the dual on the front and the dual on the back, and with the 476s, that is your armament, plus, the torpedoes. So overall, you're just going to have to get used to being able to use that against other ships and also against other planes. With no secondaries such as, no machine guns or no other cannons on this machine, you are going to heavily rely on your primary armaments to be able to do damage to the enemies, which I think is fine. It's still 4.76mm with an incredible fire rate if you've ever played the Chikugo class. The other thing as well is the Isuzu here actually has more crew members. It has a crew count of 183, which is 18 more than the Chikugo. So overall, it will have a little bit more in terms of trying to survive, because obviously crew in War Thunder Naval pretty much means, the crew in War Thunder Naval is pretty much the hit points, if you want to see it like that, which is, kind of sad, but in a way it does make sense. You can see in this picture here how the turrets are laid out. You've got one in the front, one in the back, and then you have the torpedoes kind of in the mid area right here. In a set of a quad. So yeah, it's got more survivability, it has more main firepower, but you have to give up some of its secondary firepower for that right. On top of this as well, if we look at the general performance when it comes to its maneuverability and its speed, its top speed is still at 26 knots or 48 kilometers an hour. So it's very similar, once again, to the Chikugo. So if you're used to the Chikugo and you're used to how it handles, you're used to how it is in game, you're getting quite a similar experience with the Isuzu, apart from the fact you are getting just more of a, a primary armament than you would be on the Chikugo. And to me, this is good because one of the problems that we see, especially at rank 2 for Japan, is that it is kind of bare bones. And the fact is, if you have a look at the Chikugo at its BR and look around this, there isn't really a good full-on lineup that you can run with it, and it's something that's kind of put me off researching the Chikugo, because why would I when I can just pass it going to destroyers? The other thing is the insane cost of it. So let's just switch over to the game really quick so we can basically talk about what I'm saying. So you can see here, this is my Japanese tree. And I got the Matsuki. I had a terrible time in the Matsuki because of its slow firing guns. The Udachi is pretty fun, but that of course is a gift vehicle. And you can see here that I started researching the PT-15 Type 11, which to me is going to be the crown jewel of rank 2, just because it has those two 40mm Bofors on it. It has a lot of torpedoes. For me, this looks really, really fun. This is something I would love to see, in the hands of myself. But the problem is, after having a look at it, and the price of it, 75,000, I was okay with researching it, and I was even going to be okay with researching the Chikugo. But the Chikugo is 220,000 RP. 220,000 RP for this machine. Kind of crazy, isn't it? So for me, when I have a look at this machine and I have a think about it, I'm hoping that the addition of the Isuzu class will make it so this machine here is cheaper, and also the Isuzu is as well. If the Isuzu comes in at 220,000, just to put that into clarification, if you have a look at the top machines of the Japanese Navy, the light and heavy cruisers, that is more expensive than the Kuma, the Kako, put together, if you wanted to, the Agano, and then the Furitaka and the Megami, the 5.7s, they are the same price as the Chikugo. Now, I understand that they have got the naval tech tree, set up differently compared to, other other types of the tech tree, so like aviation and helicopters and so forth. But it is insane to think that something like this, which is on the same level as the starter destroyers, is going to be that expensive at 220,000. So with the addition of more rank 2s, such as the Isuzu, and hopefully more, what we'll see out of machines like this is that they'll become cheaper, and therefore more people will run them. Also, if you want some stats on the 3 inches, because that is basically this gun is exactly the same that's on the Isuzu, you already have them. So you got an ammo count of 900, fire rate of 50 rounds per minute. So this is not a slow fire rate on these guns, and imagine 4 of them just going after a target at once. They also have access to HE, AP, and HEVT, so therefore you do have the variable time fuse to be able to deal with, you know, the incoming aircraft and stuff like that. And also the Chikugo, even though it does have more torpedoes, they are in more of an awkward place. And also when it comes to the back gun, you know, the dual 40mm Bofors, I think overall when I look at it, I would definitely take the Chikugo over the Isuzu just because of the secondary armaments, you know, the Bofors, and also, you know, the fact that you get a few more torpedoes. But it's definitely close, you know, it isn't a done deal when it comes to, you know, this Japanese tree. We also had, as I said, the addition of the Sionen, which I do have to research. It does look a lot of fun, very similar to like the Flower classes and the River classes, which are in the British tree. But overall, I am definitely happy that we're seeing more stuff added to the lower tiers of Japan. It felt like when Japan was released, rank 1 especially was a rough rank to get through. It was not what I would class as a fun experience. There was a lot of vehicles which generally were not good vehicles. You know, the T14, the T1, the Type 4, all of these had their inherent issues, and even the Hargo fighting boat had its issues as well. And then you moved on to stuff like the Type 5, the Soku Tai as well, and the Soku Tai 1940. Both of these are just horrific vehicles. And the number 1 class, you know, the actual Kusentai, and also the number 4 class were the shining lights of rank 1. And I'm hoping that with the addition of the Isuzu, the Sionen, the Chikugo, the Type 11, and this machine can really build a backbone for a fun experience for Japan at lower tiers. I don't want it to be that, you know, the naval is seen as, well, you have to get through the lower ranks just to get to the really fun stuff, you know, the larger ships, which a lot of people are interested in. I would much prefer it if we were in a situation where, you know, we would, you know, you could actually enjoy each of the ranks instead of just, you know, going forth. There is also something interesting in this video, if you haven't noticed it already. There seems to be some kind of missile going on, and you can see right there, this little thing, I'm not sure, you know, what's going on with it, but it seems to be firing a missile. So make sure, you know, to keep on top of that, and make sure that, you know, you make sure that, what are they called, like, and surface-to-surface missiles or ship-to-ship missiles eventually, I think, will come into the game, even maybe in this update. So, yeah, maybe some of you have some interesting theories about that. Maybe, you know, that will push it forward to be above the above the Chikugo class, or maybe the Chikugo class will actually realize how good it is with the addition of course, its own surface-to-surface missiles, which would be wonderful. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. I'd just like to thank Ambrosius McClellan, B. Young, Blackie, Daniel Stanton, Jay Wilt, John Ryman, Joseph Anders, Martinez, Moxie, Super Cacti, Uyins Terry, Elove Goat, and Seductive Trashcan for supporting the channel.